Just as a quick little heads up, we're going to do a little order change of speakers, just to allow Phil to get himself set up. And we just thought we'd mix it up a little bit this afternoon. And what was our order before? We've had a quick pivot to the plan, which again, I feel we're surrounded in company of those who understand the need to sometimes pivot and change plans. I'd like to just quickly open up by welcoming you in. Thank you for being here, being on time. It means a huge amount to our community to have so many people come and join what we think is a really incredible and important topic for us to be facing into at the moment. And to give a quick little bit of context around why we picked this topic, we had a committee meeting, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we instantly, before we started talking about logistics of our next event, we started talking around some of the things and the patterns that we were seeing already cropping up after the first week of lockdown. And so we instantly started talking about trust and what we were seeing starting to come up in these teams. Trust from both sides, from the leader's point of view, from the team members' point of view. And it felt like a topic that we were really interested to discuss. Hey Phil, are you able to just pop your mic on mute? Yep, awesome, thank you. So trust was what came up. We threw it out there to our community and asked if anyone was interested to bring their wealth of knowledge and experience in. We've got 3 speakers for today, and we're trying a slightly new format where we're going to do 3 lightning talks, and each one will be 7 minutes each. So if you've ever done a talk before, 7 minutes is quite a short length of time to get messages across. So we've given our speakers a good challenge. We've got 3 speakers today. First of all will be Doug Marskolk, who I've been practicing saying his name. Hopefully I've got that right. Doug's based down in Christchurch and is tuning in live from his caravan, which has turned into his office in these temporary conditions. We've also got Christophe Debouk, who's tuning in from Upper Hutt in Wellington. So he's going to be sharing with us more around making the world a better workplace. And also we've got Phil Hartwick, who's coming in from Wellington as well, and we'll be looking around building trust in dispersed teams. So we'll be doing 3 7-minute talks, and after each 7-minute talk, what we're going to do is offer up a chance to go into a breakout room and have maybe about 4 minutes of group discussion. So it's a chance for you to listen for 7 minutes, take it in, and then a chance to join in a group discussion and bounce thoughts and ideas about things that have come up for you. Now, if you are in a breakout room and you don't feel like joining the conversation, that's completely fine. You can just pop your microphone on mute. You might just want to listen in. We encourage you to take this opportunity to connect in and meet some other people in the community, but there's certainly no expectation to. You can just be an observer from the side as well. So like I mentioned, this is an experiment. We believe there's a desire to listen, but also to discuss. So we'd love your feedback at the end of the session as well, if you find that this has been positive or not so positive, and what sort of structure you might like for future events, because it might be that we're doing more of these online moving forward. All right, that's logistics. So as I mentioned, microphones are off, but when we go into the breakout rooms, which Andy Cooper, who is our logistical ninja for the day, he's going to be doing the work to send everyone into breakout rooms. When you go into the breakout room, like I said, if you're keen to chat, just remove the mute off, and if possible, depending on your connection, really great if you can turn your camera on. It allows us to connect, to bring some human element into it, but also recognize some people's connectivity doesn't really allow for that. Completely fine. All right, I think we are ready to kick off our very first speaker. So I'm going to look on my screen for Doug. There he is. Doug, are you good to go?
I am.
All right. Quick introduction for Doug. So like I mentioned, he is tuning in live from his caravan in Christchurch. Doug, I met probably about a year or 2 ago, and he's been working with a number of organisations across New Zealand. High performance is an area that he's really been engaged in, and recently been doing a lot of work with Spark and the coaches there around intrinsic motivation, looking at what really drives us within the workplace. And I think as a result of it, from what I learned earlier in the week, I'm starting to see that tying into helping people through uncertainty. So I'm going to hand it over to Doug to kick us off.
Awesome. I'll just put my timer on. Cool. Well, thanks everyone. And I've got one slide to share, which I'm happy to make available at the end. Well, I will make it available. And let's just go to that. Cool. So yeah, delight to talk to you today. And as Cheryl said, like a lot of my work is around intrinsic motivation. One of those things is autonomy. So this need that we have for choices and to feel like the choices or the decisions that we're making and the actions that we're taking are of our choice. And so when the topic of trust came up, I immediately thought, okay, well, whenever I talk to people about autonomy, often trust is one of the things that comes up. So I thought, well, let's look at this issue of trust through the lens of choices. And now we've been thrust into this position of lockdown. And so for me, there's kind of two sides to this choice coin. One is I feel like my choices are restricted, and people will feel like their choices are restricted. Like I have to stay at home. I can't go anywhere to do work. My caravan, while it is 20 meters from the house, is still on my property. And I've got to manage the kids with my wife. The other side of it though is that it enables me. So, and this is from comments that I've heard other people say, it's like, oh, suddenly I've got like 2 hours back in my day. If you're in Auckland, maybe 30 minutes or an hour everywhere else around the country. And I can choose like the different stuff that I do during the day, like when I do different things. So there's sort of this enabling and this restriction of choice in our current situation. And so that's what I kind of want to dive into in terms of trust and its relationship to autonomy. So what is trust? It's kind of our belief in the reliability and the ability of someone or something. And so for me, being able to have choices, or if we're a leader and we're in the position where we can influence and give choices, that means that we're releasing our control and we're allowing people to demonstrate their reliability and their ability. And by doing that, we enable trust. And this demonstrates and builds trust. So the question that often comes up is like, well, how do we build that, right? Like, how do we actually support choices? Because it's, in some cases, we've now got a lot more choices, okay? And some people might be feeling out of control. And so naturally, some of the behaviors that I've seen is people trying to put more controls in place around their teams in order to, I don't know, like get a sense of control. But what they're actually doing is diminishing the autonomy of their team, and in so doing, eroding trust. But you might also have like the other hat on where you're saying, well, how can I be more trusted? And so what are the things that I can do that will help those around me, my team, my leader, whatever, to trust me further? And that's where this idea of supported autonomy comes in. And so those two squiggly lines there are supposed to be a river, okay? And this is the metaphor that I want to use is when we think about a river, what makes a river is its banks, okay? And these guide the river in terms of its flow. And so if we think about, well, how can we have more choice, more autonomy, and therefore more trust flowing through our organizations, we need to think, well, what are the banks of the river that we can put in place? Now, these are not, it's not like a canal where it's rigid and restricted. It's kind of these supportive banks that help the flow of the river. And so one of those is like and this goes back to sort of the motivational theory where we have these three motivations of purpose, mastery, and autonomy. And so how do we support autonomy is through a connection to purpose. And so in this time, we might be experiencing, because our context has shifted or been disrupted, it becomes really important to regain that sense of intent and that sense of direction for ourselves and for our team, and then be able to clarify and demonstrate that in terms of our work lives. The other side of the river is competence. and this idea that I am effective, I feel effective at the things that I'm doing. And not only am I feeling effective, but I feel like I'm growing in my effectiveness. And so when we look at that, we automatically think, okay, what are the skills that I need to either demonstrate or develop to kind of create that bank of the river, to kind of support this idea of more trust and more choice? But also, what are the impediments that I could remove for others or that I could remove for myself that are limiting my effectiveness, right? And so those might be tools, they might be better flows of communication. These are kind of for you to figure out. And so where we go from here is, I'm not really a fan of giving kind of formulas and prescriptions, because everyone's context is different, and actually part of the joy of life is figuring out how we move forward in our context. And so what I found useful is, what are the kind of the prompting questions that we can ask to first uncover, well, where could we have more choice and therefore more trust? And then what are the ways that we can support that? And so these questions here could be something that you reflect on for yourself, or they could be the basis of a team discussion. And they're not perfect questions, but they kind of get at what we're trying to talk about. So important to break autonomy down in terms of saying, well, how can we have more choice over what we do, our task, over how we do it, over when we do it, over our team, who we do it with. In some cases, there might be a lot of that already. So it's just identifying the fact that we now have more choices in those spaces, and then moving on to the next questions, which are, how could we clarify and connect to our shared purpose? And where do we need to show or grow our competence, right? So just because we can't see people's competence doesn't mean it's not there. So saying, well, how could we grow that, or how could we just demonstrate that we're competent? And so to leave you with a discussion question, how could autonomy be better supported in your situation to build trust? And in the final 10 seconds, it's kind of, for me, trust is one of these kind of big words, and actually to approach it from a different angle through, like, say, choices, rather than head on saying, do we trust each other, can be really valuable to do that. So happy to make this slide available, happy to talk to anyone via any of these channels, and yeah, appreciate your time. That was quick.
Ooh, you did it in 7 minutes, Doug.
I'll stop sharing my screen as well.
High five coming to you there. Amazing. Well, you just proved that you can do a talk in 7 minutes. An awesome question to leave us on. So we thought it may be of value for group discussion. So we're going to jump now into some breakout rooms to take that question through to the breakout room as a bit of a prompter for something to jam on. So the question being, how could autonomy be better supported in your situation to build trust? And everyone's arriving back into the group. Did everyone successfully go into a breakout room and come back? Oh, yep, a few thumbs going up. Cool. Let's all give another thumbs up for Andy Cooper, who's our ninja at the moment. He's keeping us all keeping us all going. Message from, oh, yep, yeah, I just saw the message there. 4 minutes was short. We certainly got into some good conversations in our group, and again, this is a bit of an experimental format. Really keen for feedback as to how these feel going back and forward. And now we're going to jump into our next topic and introduce our next speaker. So tuning in live from Wellington and Upper Hutt, Christoph de Boek. When we asked for a little bio about him, he shared, "I want to make the world a better workplace." And I think that's a really beautiful way to summarize someone who is passionate about this work. I believe his talk topic for today is trust as a verb, and I'm going to hand over to Christoph.
Thank you, Cheryl. I've got a few more slides while I'm figuring out how to share this. I wanted to say that I might repeat some of the things that Doug said. That's the nice thing of everybody preparing something well, independently. So that must be either we're both making sense or we're on the same drugs. We'll find out. Where is the share button? Share screen. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I also would like to thank the other speakers, and last but not least, people who have made this happy, have made this possible. Let me quickly go back. So trust is a verb is what I wanted to talk about. I do think trust is a verb. Trust is something that we have to work on every day, especially in these times where many of us are feeling restricted by new constraints. So I would like to spend some time and discuss why I think trust is not something that can be forced onto people, but that it should be a consequence of actions. So you've already seen it. Next slide. This is a little bit, this is me. Like Cheryl said, hailing from Upper Hutt. I moved to New Zealand 6.5 years ago. I'm a dad, a husband, and in the weekends I'm an amateur farmer. And yeah, I would like to make the world, or maybe if I make it a bit narrower, I would like to make the IT world an awesome workplace. Why is trust important? And I'm happy that I get before Phil, because I believe that he's going to be talking about this as well. I think trust is important because it plays, together with purpose, a critical role in getting to a state of what I call respectful conflict. 7 minutes is too short to go into detail in depth for the entire model here. So please reach out afterwards if you want to discuss this further. But I think in short, respectful conflict is the state where we advance towards a greater goal through meaningful feedback and celebration of diversity. So we can bring ourselves to the conversation, and we can trust that we're not going to be ridiculed, but that we can contribute to the conversation, and everybody's open to grow their opinion. Addressing a couple of myths around trust. First one, I've heard a lot that trust needs to be earned. But in my opinion, if you want trust in a relationship, that's your own responsibility. You just have to give it, and it's not someone else's. I don't. If we believe that trust needs to be earned, that means that we turn that relationship into a competitive space with punishments and rewards. And in the long run, we will find that we will all make mistakes. So in this, with this view, it turns into a race with no end in sight. Another myth, trust is all or nothing, but I think most of us will have noticed that no matter how much you want to trust in a relationship, it is never the case that you trust someone with your life the day that you meet them. So I think trust is built over time through many small actions that make a big difference. And just like this Japanese art form that you can see here, it's called Kiri, and it involves cutting a single sheet of white paper into an elaborate form. So it's something that takes a very long time to create. And yeah, like trust, it can also be destroyed in seconds. Last thing that I've heard, people told to be trusted. So I think that telling someone I need you to trust me makes just as much sense as approaching a stranger and telling them I want you to love me. I think through your own actions and behavior, you can invite others to make that feeling mutual, but it's not something that you can't command. So trust is a verb, and I believe that the proof is in the doing, meaning it's in to trust, the active, having a focus on the active component on that word. And it also has a different meaning to all of us. A while ago, I found an article that said that you had to do 5 specific things if you wanted to be trusted. Be on time, do what you say, finish what you start, say please and thank you, and be appropriate. To be honest, I think that while they are all great qualities, I think that list says more about the author of that article than it says about any of us or our relationships that we have. So these are 4 actions that I think we can take in order to increase trust in a relationship. I think we should start with trusting others, encourage other people to make decisions. Just make sure that you get there in a way that feels safe and comfortable for everyone. because the ideal state that you have envisaged and that you want to get to might be overwhelming if it's introduced too abruptly. Secondly, share something about yourself so that people get to know you, your own values and your beliefs. There is an area of just enough there. Oversharing isn't helpful, but not sharing anything at all isn't helpful either. So it's about finding that sweet spot. Ask questions, so be curious. Ask questions that you don't know the answers to in order to get to know something about the other person as well. Don't make it sound like a police interrogation, but be willing to learn. Show a genuine interest in the other person. And lastly, I think there is nothing quite so powerful to establish trust in a relationship as asking for help, because I think that removes a lot of the perceived barriers. A couple of practical examples of building trust more in it. So while the other 4 actions were mainly on an individual level, I wanted to share 2 practical examples of how to build trust more on the team level. The use of a team living contract, and what I mean with that is that you invite members to share what they offer and what they expect from a team. It's easy to do that as a team effort, but by inviting other people to share that, you allow them to express what they think is important in that relationship, and making their voices heard is what builds the trust there. And also a team town hall. I remember when I joined the team one day, I invited every member of the team to talk about themselves for I believe it was 5 minutes. It has to be an invitation. You can't force someone to talk about themselves, but by doing so, everybody in the team learned something about someone else, something that had nothing to do necessarily with work, but just about who they were. Again, those values and the belief system, and it immediately created a boost in the trust on the team. So here's my question that I would like to send you away with in the breakout rooms. Is there a relationship in your professional life in which you can start to give trust tomorrow instead of waiting to be trusted? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Christoph. Some new thoughts and ideas. Going to send everyone off to breakout meetup rooms. We'll be back in 4 minutes. Looking at Andy Cooper. Need some lift music. Do, 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 do. In the meantime, I'll give you a chance to contemplate for yourself that question. And just a recap, I just think I took a quick photo. Actually, Christoph, can you just repeat the question? I tried taking a photo, but then the little link came up.
Sure. The question is there a relationship in your professional life where you can start to build trust by giving it rather than wait for someone else to give it to you?
All right, got the question. Breakout rooms look like they're going. Nice work, Andy Cooper. See you in your breakout rooms.
I will be doing it without a presentation, Andy. So.
All good, Phil. All faith in you.
Yeah.
All right. Wow. Those 4 minutes go quickly.
Tell me about it.
I think that in our breakout room, we've almost come up with a new model. Awesome discussions. Thank you, Christoph, for sharing that. Trust can't be forced on someone, it needs to be earned. I think was something that sort of resonated in our group, and hopefully for yourself, you've captured some notes and thoughts to keep this discussion going. Introducing our final speaker for today. Phil is not only a legendary leader and supporter of great leaders, He also supports our Welly Band committee. He's often there to support and help what we're doing and challenge our own thinking within the committee. I really love getting the opportunity to work with him. And so when we landed on this topic of trust, he put his hand up to offer up a talk for today. So I'd like to hand it over to Phil Harwick.
Thank you. So in the spirit of agility, I wasn't able to get into this initially. I finally got on my iPad. I'm now not able to share my presentation. So I have no slides to share. So I'm going to ad-lib this presentation. And hopefully this all makes sense. I'd like to talk about, first of all, some concepts that we use when we talk with teams about trust and helping them collaborate. So I'm going to share some concepts with you. Then I'd like to talk about the impact of moving into dispersed teams, so teams that are used to being collaborative and in the same co-located place. And then lastly, some tips about how to improve trust in those situations. So to start with, one of the first things I want to say is I don't believe there's such a thing as team trust. I think what actually we have is a very different situation, and that is that trust is individual, it's personal, it's between two people. And so every member of a team has different levels of trust with every other members in the team. So what we have is we've got a trust ecosystem of relationships. Some of those relationships are strong and some of them are weak. And when one person violates trust with another, it will have an impact on the relationships in that team. The important thing to note is the level of trust in a team is actually simply the lowest level of trust between two members, which is kind of scary. Let's think about two members of a team. If you think about it, two people, when they're in some sort of relationship, working or otherwise, they in fact don't necessarily know what the other person or how much the other person trusts them. So they have a sense of how much they trust the person, but how much the person trusts them, they're not sure about. And they don't necessarily know how that's come to be. So there's an interesting thing to think about is when you say, do, or behave in some way, you tend to know why you did that, or you can explain it. Sometimes it's logical, but often we say it's situational or contextual. I did that because that was what was happening at the time. And we may diminish the importance of the things that we do. Whereas when somebody else is doing something, we don't know what they were thinking, so we make up our own stories, right? And sometimes we attribute reasons for their actions, which are not necessarily that positive. And in fact, we may exaggerate and get them completely wrong. So we call that the fundamental attribution error. So if you think about two team members, visualize this. You've got Janet on my left and Mike on my right. And in front of them, they each have a bucket. Now that bucket represents a trust account. And if that bucket is full, then that person trusts the other person. If that bucket is empty, that person doesn't trust the other person. So Janet on my left, she has a bucket that's quite full. That's because Mike has been making lots of nice deposits in her bucket, things that have actually helped her improve her trust in him. Strangely though, Mike's bucket is virtually empty. Of course, does Janet know that? No, she doesn't. Will Mike tell her? No, he won't. Why not? Well, Mike's a nice guy. That relationship with Janet's important. He wants to be a good team player, so he probably will never say anything, but he might tell other people. Unfortunately, what this results in is what we call artificial harmony, which is something we see a lot of in teams, especially in New Zealand. Now let's think about teams that suddenly disperse, right? They've gone from mostly being co-located, mostly working in the same space, and suddenly they're elsewhere. What has happened? Well, we don't see each other much anymore. We only see each other through these devices like this. It's all a bit techno, it's a bit clunky, and we don't communicate as well or as much because we don't want to be broadcasting to everyone. We're not having kind of little conversations with different people. It's all at once. So, and when we do have a conversation with one person, it's almost always about work. So we lose a whole lot of stuff. We lose visual cues. We lose the kind of sense of continuous communication. So what does that what happens to us then? We start to make assumptions about what people are doing and what they're saying, but more importantly, why they're saying them and what they're meaning by what they said. The fact that someone's not looking in the screen when I'm talking is an example. The fact that someone hasn't responded to my email in a day and a half, that's a problem. So when we go remote, the impact on trust is potentially quite a lot higher, and so it's more fragile. Okay, let's just talk quickly about how we assess trust between people. Let's unpack it a bit. We like to look at it in a three-lens way. So we have a model that says one way of looking at trust is reliability, right? So if you think about reliability, people are watching what you do, what you say, and so forth. And your level of trust in that person will go up when that person operates competently, consistently, etc. Right? So reliability being the first. The second thing that we look at is relatability. So does the person that I'm talking about here relate to me? Is it somebody that I feel gets me, and do I get them? And so my level of trust in them goes up when I get to know them and they get to know me and they spend time doing that. The third area of trust that we look to is very important also. It's intentionality. So when we're talking about somebody else, we're always trying to figure out what their agenda is. What's their meaning for doing what they're doing? What's their intention? And my level of trust of that person will go up if I think that they're transparent, it's open, and their agenda seems to be aligned with mine, or at least it's not in conflict. Now, last thing is, how do we raise trust in dispersed or remote teams? First of all, I'd like to point out that trust is built and often diminished by little things. So let's think about reliability. Firstly, don't be a slack arse. Make sure you respond to people when they are asking for things and they're communicating with you. Do what you say you're going to do. So follow up. In terms of relatability, be interested in your teammates. Take time to learn about their situation, their context. Invest in one-on-one relationships. Take some time to do that. And intentionality, it's not all about you, boo, as my wife would tell me when she's sick of listening to me about me. Before you tell everybody else what you need, find out what they need, get some alignment, and make sure you're inclusive, because when you leave people out inadvertently, they start to think you're doing it for a reason, and it's usually not positive. So to finish up here, because I think I'm over 7 minutes, to recap, trust is a two-way paired thing, not so much a team thing, but we build it through pairs. We can easily erode trust when we work remotely, and we assess how much trust through 3 different lenses: reliability, relatability, and intentionality. And then lastly, it's very important to think about the little things to build trust, particularly in remote teams. So the question I have for you to consider in your breakout groups is, what have you seen teams do that can help build or lift trust?
Can you share that with us one more time, please, Phil?
So the question I'd like you to consider in your breakout groups is, what have you seen teams do, either that you're on or other teams, that will help build or lift trust?
Nice. Congratulations on doing that successfully with agility and responding to change. Really awesome. We'll leave you with that question as you head into your breakout rooms. We are back. How do I go? There we go, gallery view. That is our Wellybam event for April. April 2020. Again, this was an experiment for us. We've run a couple of these. We only formed as a committee, I'm going to say at the end of last year. I think November was our first event. And we're always looking at new topics and ideas for things that are of interest to the community, and also looking at new ways in which we can keep it interesting and different and relevant. So this was 2 new things for us. One was doing it online, which we haven't done before, and the other was around having a bunch of short talks and then a chance to talk and discuss afterwards. So what I'm going to do is quickly put into the chat channel to everyone. There's a URL I've just put. It just takes you through to a Google form with 3 questions. What did you like? What was lacking? And what would you long for? What good ideas do you have? No pressure at all. Just while it's fresh in your mind, if you've got any thoughts for what went well and what we might keep doing, and what maybe we could improve or do a bit better, would be really, really, really welcomed. I'd like to also just take a minute to thank the committee. This is a voluntary group of people that get together on a regular basis. We come up with ideas and ways to do things that we hope help the community. So thank you for all of your efforts to our committee. If anyone is interested to come and join our committee, it's quite a lot of fun and we're experimenting all the time. But we're always looking for new people to come in and bring some fresh ideas and thoughts on it as well. So thank you. I'd like to gift you 1 more minute to yourself before you go back into your weekend. Take a moment to just think about if there's anything that's come up for you today that you might like to turn into some form of action over the next couple of weeks, whether it's with a customer, whether it's with your team, whether it's with people in your household, about a learning that you can take away from today to actually go and experiment with building that trust. I hope this has been a valuable session for you. Thank you for being part of it. We'll make sure that we share the slides in the Meetup app. And Meetup app is where we'll list our next event as well. So if we get some good feedback, we'll run another one of these probably in the next month or 2 as well. So thank you. Kia ora. Have a wonderful weekend. It was so nice to see all of your faces, and thank you for being part of it.